The pearl earring gleamed against white linen like a drop of frozen moonlight. Lydia Hawthorne stood alone in her bedroom, her hand steady as she picked it up. Not hers. Never hers. She'd seen it before, dangling from Maryanne Crowell's ear just hours earlier at dinner. Now it was here, in her bed. The room tilted, but Lydia didn't sway. She'd learned long ago that betrayal doesn't announce itself with screams. It whispers through small, deliberate details. Her first marriage had taught her that lesson in Blood and Bankruptcy. Evidence doesn't lie. People do. So she didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't confront. She packed. What happens when trust shatters in a single glance? When the life you built crumbles over something as small as a piece of jewelry? Stay with me through this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The Caldwell estate blazed with candlelight that evening, every window a golden eye watching the procession of carriages winding up the hill. Lydia had dressed carefully, midnight blue silk that made her look composed, untouchable. Adrian walked beside her, his hand light at the small of her back, the picture of aristocratic ease. To anyone watching, they were flawless. The young lord and his striking wife, married 18 months, still wrapped in that sheen of newness that made other couples envious. Lydia knew better than to trust surfaces. Inside, the Caldwell ballroom hummed with controlled chaos, servants weaving through clusters of nobility, musicians tuning strings in the corner, the sharp, bright laughter of women who'd perfected the art of sounding delighted while saying nothing kind. Lady Penelope Caldwell swept toward them immediately, her smile wide and meaningless. "Lydia, darling, you look absolutely severe tonight. Adrian, you've brought the Ice Queen. How refreshing." Lydia smiled back, just as empty. "Penelope, always so warm." Adrian squeezed her waist gently, his signal that she was being too sharp. She ignored it. Penelope had spent their last 3 encounters making little comments about Lydia's common background, her lack of aristocratic lineage, the way she managed the Vale household as if it were a business rather than a home. The woman was exhausting, but it wasn't Penelope who made Lydia's stomach tighten that night. It was Maryanne Crowell. She appeared halfway through dinner, gliding into the room in deep burgundy, her dark hair swept up, pearl earrings catching the light. Maryanne had run the Vale household for nearly a decade before Adrian married. She'd been his father's choice, efficient, loyal, unshakable. When Lydia arrived as the new Lady Vale, Maryanne had stepped aside graciously, too graciously. She'd moved to a smaller estate nearby, visited often, and never once showed resentment, which was, Lydia thought, its own kind of warning. Tonight, Maryanne held court at the far end of the table, and Adrian's attention kept drifting toward her. Not romantically, Lydia wasn't worried about that. It was something else. Deference. The way he leaned in when she spoke, nodded at her suggestions, laughed at her observations, as if she still held some invisible authority he couldn't quite shake. "Maryanne says the eastern orchards are suffering from early frost," Adrian mentioned during the second course, turning to Lydia. "We should consider replanting the lower fields." Lydia set down her fork carefully. "I've already arranged for cover crops. The steward sent the orders last week." Adrian blinked. "Did he?" Maryanne mentioned she hadn't seen any. "Perhaps Maryanne isn't receiving all the household correspondence anymore," Lydia said lightly, "since she no longer manages the estate." Silence dropped like a stone. Maryanne smiled from across the table, serene and unbothered. "Of course, Lydia. I wouldn't dream of overstepping. I only relay what I hear from the staff when I visit. Old habits." "Perhaps newer habits would serve everyone better," Lydia replied. Adrian's hand found hers under the table. Another warning. She pulled away. The rest of the dinner blurred. Lydia smiled at the right moments, responded when spoken to, but inside she was cataloging. The way Maryanne touched Adrian's arm when making a point, the way he softened when she did, the way other guests deferred to her opinion on Vale matters as if she still ran the house, and most tellingly, the way Maryanne's gaze would slide to Lydia every so often, assessing, measuring, calculating. They left near midnight. The carriage ride home was silent except for the clatter of wheels on cobblestone. Adrian stared out the window, his jaw tight. "You were harsh tonight," he said finally. "I was honest." Maryanne has given years of service to my family. She deserves respect. She had respect, Lydia said, but she doesn't run your house anymore. I do. Adrian turned to her then, his expression caught between frustration and something softer. Why does it feel like you're fighting a war I don't see? Because you're not looking, Lydia wanted to say. Because you still see the woman who kept your father's estate running smoothly and assume loyalty is permanent, because you don't notice the small ways I'm being eroded. Instead, she said, maybe you're not paying attention. He looked away. When they arrived home, Lydia went upstairs alone. The bedroom was dark, the fire banked low. She undressed slowly, her mind still replaying the evening. Maryanne's smile, Adrian's obliviousness, the subtle theater of power she'd just been forced to participate in. She pulled back the coverlet. And there it was. A single pearl earring nestled against the pillow on Adrian's side of the bed. Lydia's breath stopped. She knew that earring. She'd watched it sway against Maryanne Crowell's neck all evening. Her first instinct was rage, hot, immediate, the kind that demanded she storm downstairs and shove the thing in Adrian's face. But rage had burned her before. Her first husband had been a liar, a gambler, a man who drained her family's fortune and then blamed her for not stopping him. She'd loved him desperately, believed his apologies, trusted his tears, and she'd lost everything. After that marriage collapsed, Lydia rebuilt herself on a simple principle: evidence over emotion. Words were cheap, feelings were unreliable, but facts, physical, tangible proof, couldn't be argued with. The earring was proof. It didn't matter that she couldn't imagine Adrian being unfaithful. Didn't matter that logically it made no sense for Maryanne to leave something so obvious. The object was here, in her bed. And objects didn't lie. Lydia picked it up, held it to the candlelight. The pearl gleamed, innocent and damning. She didn't wake Adrian, didn't confront him that night. Instead, she packed a single trunk, carefully, methodically, the way she'd done once before when her world fell apart. Dresses, practical items, the jewelry that was hers alone. She left behind anything Adrian had given her. She wasn't fleeing in desperation, she was executing a plan. By dawn, she was gone. She took a carriage to her sister's estate 30 miles south, a modest property Lydia had inherited from her mother. Caroline met her at the door, still in her nightgown, eyes wide. "Lydia, what?" "I'll explain," Lydia said quietly, "but I need a place to stay." Caroline didn't ask questions. She simply pulled her sister inside. For 3 days, Lydia said nothing. She moved through Caroline's house like a ghost, calm and cold. She didn't weep, didn't rage. She wrote letters, careful, precise inquiries to contacts in the city. She requested records, receipts, travel logs. If Adrian was having an affair, there would be more evidence. There always was. On the 4th day, Caroline finally cornered her in the library. "Are you going to tell me what happened, or are we just pretending you've moved in permanently?" Lydia looked up from the letter she was writing. "I left Adrian." Caroline sat down hard. "You what?" "I found evidence of infidelity." "Evidence? Lydia, what does that even— Did you see something?" Lydia reached into her pocket and placed the pearl earring on the desk between them. Caroline stared at it. "That's an earring. Maryanne Crowell's earring. In my bed. In your—" Caroline's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then something closer to alarm. "Lydia, this is insane. Did you talk to Adrian? Did you ask him?" "I don't need to ask. I know what this means." "You think you know," Caroline said sharply. "You're doing it again. You're deciding the story before hearing it." "I heard enough stories from Thomas," Lydia snapped. "I heard excuses and apologies and lies until I had nothing left. I won't do that again." Caroline's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Adrian isn't Thomas. Everyone says that, until they are. So you're just done? You're throwing away your marriage over a piece of jewelry?" "I'm protecting myself." "From what? Lydia, you don't even know if—" "I know enough." Silence settled between them, thick and uncomfortable. Caroline rubbed her face, suddenly looking exhausted. "Fine. Stay here. But you're making a mistake." Lydia turned back to her letter. "I've made worse." Meanwhile, 30 miles north, Adrian Vale was tearing his house apart. He'd woken that first morning to find Lydia's side of the bed cold, her wardrobe half empty, and a single note on the desk. I cannot stay where I am not trusted. Do not follow me. No explanation. No argument. Just gone. For the first day, Adrian assumed she'd gone to Caroline's to cool off after their argument. He was annoyed. Lydia had a habit of retreating when upset, but not worried. By the second day, worry crept in. By the third, he sent a messenger to Caroline's estate. The reply was brief. She is safe. She does not wish to speak to you. Adrian crumpled the note in his fist, anger surging. What the hell had happened? They'd argued, yes, but nothing catastrophic, nothing that warranted this. He summoned the household staff that afternoon, every last one of them. They assembled in the main hall, nervous and confused. Did anyone see Lady Vale leave? He asked. Silence. Did anyone speak to her that night? Notice anything unusual? More silence. Then finally, one of the younger maids raised her hand tentatively. She seemed upset, my lord, when she came upstairs, but she didn't say anything. Upset how? The girl fidgeted. Quiet upset. Not crying. Just cold. Cold. That sounded like Lydia when she was hurt and refusing to show it. Adrian dismissed them and went upstairs. He stood in the bedroom, trying to reconstruct the evening. They'd argued in the carriage. She'd come up here alone. And then... what? He searched the room methodically, checked her desk, her wardrobe, the vanity. Nothing seemed out of place except for what was missing. Her clothes, her personal items. He was about to give up when he noticed something odd. The bed linens had been changed. Fresh sheets, fresh coverlet, which was unusual. The staff normally changed linens on Thursdays, and this was Sunday. He called for the housekeeper, Mrs. Brennan, a stout woman who'd served the Vale family for 20 years. Who changed the bed linens? Mrs. Brennan frowned. I didn't order it, my lord. Perhaps one of the maids. Find out. She returned an hour later looking uncertain. No one changed them, my lord, at least no one I can find. The laundry records show the usual schedule. Adrian stared at her. Someone changed these sheets. They didn't do it themselves. Perhaps Lady Vale did? Why would she change her own sheets in the middle of the night before leaving? Mrs. Brennan had no answer. That was the first crack. Over the next week, Adrian started noticing other small inconsistencies. Messages he'd been told were sent, but never arrived. Orders he'd given that were somehow altered. A delivery of supplies that went to the wrong estate. Each incident, on its own, was minor, easily explained by human error, but together they formed a pattern. Someone was interfering with his household. He began asking questions, quietly at first, then more insistently. The staff grew nervous. Some claimed ignorance. Others gave contradictory answers. And through it all, one name kept surfacing. Maryanne Crowell. She'd visited often. Still gave occasional instructions to staff who'd known her for years. Still received correspondence about estate matters. And the staff, loyal to her from a decade of service, still deferred to her, even when Lydia gave different orders. Adrian sat in his study one evening, the pieces slowly assembling in his mind. He didn't want to believe it. Maryanne had been a cornerstone of his life since childhood. She'd comforted him when his father died, managed the estate through the chaos of inheritance, stayed on even when it would have been easier to leave. But Lydia had been right about one thing. Maryanne hadn't truly let go. He sent a note requesting she visit. She arrived the next afternoon, poised as always, carrying a basket of preserves from her own kitchen. Adrian, how lovely. I've been meaning to... Did you plant something in my bedroom? Maryanne froze mid-step. I beg your pardon? Lydia left. Suddenly, without explanation, and I'm finding inconsistencies throughout the house. Orders changed, messages lost. You've been visiting regularly, you still have influence with the staff. Maryanne set down the basket slowly, her expression shifting from surprise to something harder. You think I drove her away? Did you? Lydia drove herself away, Maryanne said quietly. She never trusted me, never trusted this house. She came in determined to erase everything I'd built. You don't run this house anymore. I know that, Maryanne snapped, and for the first time Adrian saw real anger in her eyes. I know I was replaced. I know she's your wife, and I'm just the woman who kept everything running while you were off at university, while your father was dying, while this entire estate would have collapsed without me. That's not... I gave 10 years, Adrian. 10 years of my life to this place. And she waltzes in and treats me like I'm the enemy. Adrian stared at her, something cold settling in his chest. What did you do? Maryanne looked away. Nothing she didn't deserve. What did you do? She didn't answer, just straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked out. Adrian stood there, the silence of the house pressing in around him. And for the first time since Lydia left, he realized he might have been the blind one all along. Far to the south, Lydia sat at Caroline's desk, surrounded by letters and ledgers. She'd been building her case methodically, tracking dates, cross-referencing servant testimony she'd gathered before leaving, constructing a timeline of deception. But the more she worked, the less certain she felt. The earring was still proof. It was there. But nothing else fit the pattern of an affair. No unexplained absences, no secret correspondence, no financial irregularities that might suggest a second household. Just the earring. Caroline entered with tea, set it down without a word. You think I'm obsessing, Lydia said quietly. I think you're terrified, Caroline replied. And when you're terrified, you investigate instead of feeling. Feelings lie. So does evidence. If you're looking hard enough for a story, you'll find one. Lydia's hand stilled on the ledger. What if I'm wrong? Then you go home and find out the truth, the real truth, not the one you've built in your head. Lydia closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw Thomas, her first husband, his face earnest as he swore he'd stopped gambling, that he'd change, that she just had to trust him one more time. And she'd trusted him. And he'd ruined her. I can't, she whispered. You can, Caroline said firmly. Because Adrian isn't Thomas, and you know that. You're just too scared to admit it. The words landed like stones. Lydia sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the past pressing against the fragile hope of the present. Finally, she stood. I need to go back. To talk to him? To confront her? Caroline raised an eyebrow. Maryanne? If there's a game being played, she's the one who knows the rules. And if you're wrong? Lydia picked up the pearl earring from the desk, held it to the light one last time. Then I'll finally know the truth. She left the next morning, traveling light, her heart a knot of dread and determination. The journey felt both endless and too short. By the time the Vale estate came into view, the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. She didn't go to the main house. She went to Maryanne's cottage. The door opened before she could knock. Maryanne stood there, unsurprised, her expression unreadable. I wondered when you'd come, she said quietly. Lydia held up the earring. Did you leave this in my bed? For a long moment, Maryanne didn't answer. Then slowly, she stepped aside. Come in. It's time we talked. The cottage smelled of lavender and old wood. Lydia stepped inside, her pulse hammering, but her face remained composed. Maryanne closed the door softly and gestured toward a small sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth. Two chairs faced each other across a low table. Sit, Maryanne said. Not a request. Lydia stayed standing. I asked you a question. Maryanne moved to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of wine with steady hands. You came all this way. The least you can do is sit while I answer it. Every instinct told Lydia to leave, to go straight to Adrian, to end this confrontation before it began. But she'd spent 2 weeks building theories in the dark. She needed to look this woman in the eye and hear the truth, whatever it was. She sat. Maryanne handed her a glass and settled into the opposite chair, her posture perfect, her expression maddeningly calm. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped and hissed. Yes, Maryanne said finally. I left the earring. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lydia's hand tightened around the glass stem, but she forced herself to remain still. Why? Because you needed to leave. That's not an answer. Maryanne took a slow sip of wine, her gaze never leaving Lydia's face. Do you know what it's like to build something from nothing? To pour 10 years of your life into keeping an estate running, a family afloat, a young man from destroying everything his father worked for? This isn't about you. It's entirely about me, Maryanne cut in, her voice sharpening. I was 17 when I came to the Vale estate. Adrian's father hired me because I was clever and desperate and willing to work myself to the bone. I learned every detail of that house, every debt, every harvest cycle, every petty alliance that kept the family solvent. When Lord Vale died, Adrian was 23 and utterly unprepared. I held everything together, alone. Lydia set down her glass carefully. And then he married me. And then he married you. Maryanne's smile was bitter. The woman who waltzed in with her tragic first marriage and her cold efficiency and decided that everything I'd built needed to be dismantled. I didn't dismantle anything. I managed the household the way any wife would. You erased me. Maryanne's voice went quiet, which somehow made it worse. Every tradition I'd established, every system I'd put in place, you changed it. You countermanded my orders to the staff, ignored my advice, made it clear that I was no longer welcome in the house I'd given my life to. Because it wasn't your house anymore, Lydia said, her own anger rising. It was mine. Was it? Maryanne leaned forward. Or did you just see me as competition? Another woman who might take something from you the way your first husband did? The accusation landed like a slap. Lydia's breath caught, and for a second she couldn't speak. Maryanne's expression softened, but not with kindness, with pity. I know about Thomas, about what he did to you, how he gambled away your inheritance, how you had to rebuild from shame and debt. I understand why you see betrayal in every shadow. But I am not him, Lydia, and Adrian is not him either. Then why the earring? Lydia's voice came out hoarse. Why sabotage my marriage if you weren't trying to steal him? Maryanne laughed, short, joyless. Steal him? You think I want Adrian? I raised him. I watched him grow from an arrogant boy into a decent man. I have no romantic illusions about him. Then what do you want? I wanted you to understand what it feels like to lose something you built, to watch someone else take control and dismiss you as irrelevant. Maryanne stood, walked to the fire, her back to Lydia. I wanted you to feel the fear I felt when you arrived, that I'd be erased, forgotten, that everything I'd sacrificed would mean nothing. Lydia stood as well, her hands shaking now. So you tried to destroy my marriage out of spite? I tried to make you see that you weren't the only one fighting to survive. Maryanne turned, her eyes bright. But you didn't see it. You just ran. Built your case from a distance like it was a ledger to balance instead of a life to live. You don't get to judge how I protect myself. I'm not judging. I'm telling you the truth you came here for. Maryanne's voice steadied. The earring was cruel. It was petty. But it was also a test. I thought if you loved Adrian, really loved him, you'd confront him. You'd fight. Instead, you packed your things and disappeared. Because I've been lied to before, and you'll keep being lied to if you keep choosing fear over trust. Maryanne stepped closer. I wanted to hurt you, yes. I wanted you to leave. But I also wanted to see if you were strong enough to stay. Lydia's vision blurred. She refused to cry in front of this woman, refused to give her that satisfaction. You had no right. I had every right to fight for my place, just like you did when you came into that house and claimed it as yours. Maryanne's voice gentled, just slightly. We're not so different, Lydia. We're both women who've had to claw our way into spaces that don't want us. The difference is I stayed and fought from the inside. You ran. I didn't run. I protected myself. Same thing. Lydia grabbed her cloak, her composure finally cracking. I'm going to tell Adrian everything. He'll throw you out. He already knows. Lydia froze. Maryanne's expression was unreadable. I told him 3 days ago that I'd interfered with household orders, undermined your authority, planted the earring, all of it. You... what? He gave me a choice. Confess or be exposed. I chose confession. Maryanne sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. I'm leaving the area entirely. Selling this cottage. The staff who were loyal to me have been dismissed or reassigned. Adrian made it very clear that my time here is over. Lydia stood frozen, her mind racing. If you already confessed, why am I here? Because Adrian didn't tell you. He's waiting for you to come back on your own, to choose him instead of your investigation. Maryanne met her eyes. He's been dismantling my work for weeks, Lydia. Every altered message, every redirected order, he traced it all back to me. He fought for you without you even knowing, and you're still out there building evidence like he's the enemy. The words hit harder than Lydia expected. She sank back into the chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired, Maryanne said simply. Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending I don't resent losing the only home I've ever known. And tired of watching you make the same mistake I did, choosing pride over connection. You tried to ruin my marriage. I did. And I failed, because Adrian saw through it, and you— Maryanne paused. You have a chance to go back and actually build something real. Don't waste it proving you were right to leave. Lydia stood slowly, her mind a storm of anger and confusion, and something she didn't want to name— shame. I should hate you. You probably do. I'd hate me too. Maryanne stood as well, moved to the door. But hatred won't fix what's broken. Only truth will. And the truth is, you're terrified of being hurt again, so you keep choosing safety over risk. It's not sustainable, Lydia. Eventually you have to jump. Lydia stepped out into the cold evening air without another word. The walk back to the main house felt endless. Her thoughts spiraled— Maryanne's confession, Adrian's investigation, her own stubborn certainty that evidence was enough. She'd been so sure, so convinced that the earring was proof of betrayal, and she'd been wrong, not about the earring's presence. That was real, but about what it meant. She'd built an entire narrative around a single object and never questioned whether the story fit the man she'd married. The house loomed ahead, lights glowing in the windows. Lydia hesitated at the front steps, her hand on the cold iron railing. She could go in, confront Adrian, apologize. But the thought of admitting she'd fled over a planted piece of jewelry, that she'd trusted her worst assumptions over her husband's character, it made her sick. She went in anyway. The entrance hall was empty. She moved through the familiar corridors, her footsteps echoing on marble. Voices drifted from the study. Adrian's, low and tense, and another she didn't immediately recognize. She pushed the door open. Adrian sat behind his desk, papers scattered in front of him. Across from him stood a man Lydia vaguely recognized— Mr. Garrett, the estate steward. Both men looked up sharply. Lydia. Adrian stood so fast his chair scraped back. His face cycled through shock, relief, and something harder to read. You're back. I spoke to Maryanne, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Adrian's jaw tightened. She told you. Some of it. I want to hear the rest from you. Mr. Garrett cleared his throat awkwardly. I should— Stay, Adrian said. You're part of this. Lydia frowned. Part of what? Adrian gestured to the papers on his desk. Sit down. This is going to take a while. She sat. Her heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. Adrian remained standing, his hands braced on the desk. After you left, I started looking into things. Small inconsistencies, messages that didn't arrive, orders that got changed, supplies delivered to the wrong locations. I thought it was incompetence. Then I realized it was deliberate. Maryanne, Lydia said quietly. Maryanne and others. Adrian nodded to Mr. Garrett. Tell her. The steward looked uncomfortable. Lady Vale, I've been altering household orders for nearly a year. Not all of them. Just enough to create confusion, make you look inefficient. Lydia stared at him. Why? Because Mrs. Crowell asked me to. She said it was temporary, that you needed to be tested, proven. I didn't realize it would go this far. How far did it go? Adrian pulled out a ledger, flipped it open. Delayed correspondence with your sister. Redirected invitations so you'd miss social events. Changed meal orders to make it seem like you couldn't manage basic household functions. Altered staff schedules so the people loyal to you were never where you needed them. Lydia's stomach turned. For a year? Nearly. I didn't catch it until you left. Then I went back through everything. Adrian's voice was tight. Mr. Garrett has been very cooperative since then. He's given me names, others who were involved. How many? 7 staff members, all long-term, all loyal to Maryanne. Adrian slid a list across the desk. They're being dismissed, quietly. I didn't want a scandal, but I also couldn't let them stay. Lydia scanned the list. People she'd worked with daily, smiled at in hallways, trusted to carry out basic tasks. They all knew? Some more than others. A few just followed Maryanne's instructions without questioning. Others actively participated. Adrian's expression was grim. I should have seen it. I should have listened when you said something felt wrong. I didn't tell you it felt wrong. I just fought with you about Maryanne. You shouldn't have had to spell it out. Adrian finally sat, suddenly looking exhausted. I trusted the system because it had always worked. I trusted Maryanne because she'd always been there. I didn't question why you were struggling when you'd managed your family's estate perfectly well before marrying me. Lydia's throat tightened. I thought you didn't notice. I noticed. I just assumed you needed time to adjust, that you were being too controlling, too suspicious. He laughed bitterly. Turns out your suspicions were right, just aimed at the wrong thing. Silence settled over the room. Mr. Garrett shifted uncomfortably. You can go, Adrian told him. We'll discuss your termination terms tomorrow. The steward nodded, relief washing over his face, and left quickly. Lydia and Adrian sat alone in the study, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. Why didn't you tell me when you found out? Lydia asked finally. Because I wanted you to come back on your own, not because I'd solved the mystery for you. Adrian leaned back, his eyes searching hers. You left without giving me a chance to explain. I thought if I just fixed everything and presented you with the solution, you'd feel like I was trying to control the narrative, prove I was right and you were wrong. I was wrong. You were hurt. There's a difference. Lydia looked down at her hands. I found the earring and I panicked. All I could think about was Thomas, how he'd lied and I'd believed him, how I'd ignored the signs because I wanted to trust him. I couldn't do that again. So you chose evidence over conversation. Evidence doesn't lie. It doesn't tell the whole truth either. Adrian stood, moved around the desk. He didn't touch her, just leaned against the edge, closer now. The earring was real. Your fear was real, but you filled in the story around it without asking me what actually happened. Because I was terrified of hearing a lie. And instead you heard nothing. His voice was soft but firm. Lydia, I can't build a marriage with someone who runs every time something seems wrong. I need you to fight with me, not against me, not from a distance. I don't know how to do that, she admitted, the words scraping out. Every instinct I have says protect yourself first. Verify. Document. Don't trust until you have proof. That's fine for business. It's death for a relationship. She looked up at him, her eyes burning. Then what do I do? Just ignore my instincts? No, bring them to me. Tell me when you're scared, when something feels off, when you find a damn earring in our bed. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. Give me a chance to be on your side before you decide I'm the enemy. Lydia stood, her legs shaky. What if you'd lied? What if it had been real? Then we'd deal with it together. Or not. But at least we'd know the truth instead of living in separate versions of it. She closed her eyes, the exhaustion of 2 weeks crashing over her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, too, for not seeing what was happening, for dismissing your concerns about Maryanne, for being so damn blind. They stood there, inches apart but not touching, both of them bruised and wary. What happens now? Lydia asked. Adrian hesitated. That depends. Do you want to stay? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Lydia thought about Maryanne's words. You keep choosing safety over risk. She thought about the life she'd built in self-protection, the walls she'd constructed so carefully. They'd kept her safe. They'd also kept her alone. Yes, she said finally, but I need to know it won't always be like this, that we can actually talk before things explode. I need that too. And I need you to understand that trusting doesn't come easily for me, that I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I know. I'll mess up too. Adrian's mouth quirked slightly. We're both disasters at this. Despite everything, Lydia almost smiled. Clearly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand found hers warm and solid. I missed you, he said quietly. I missed you too, even when I was furious at you. Especially then, probably. This time she did smile, just a little. The tension in the room shifted, not disappearing but softening into something more bearable. Are we okay? She asked. Not yet, but we will be. Adrian squeezed her hand. We have to actually do the work, though, both of us. I know. A knock at the door made them both turn. Mrs. Brennan stood there, looking apologetic. My lord, my lady, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the kitchens. Adrian sighed. What kind of situation? The cook and two of the scullery maids are refusing to work together, something about conflicting orders and loyalty disputes. Mrs. Brennan winced. It's getting heated. Lydia and Adrian exchanged glances. The joys of dismantling a shadow hierarchy, Adrian muttered. Should I? Mrs. Brennan began. We'll handle it, Lydia said, surprising herself. She looked at Adrian. Together? He nodded. Together. They walked down to the kitchen side by side. The noise hit them before they reached the door. Raised voices, the clatter of pots being slammed, someone crying. Lydia's stomach knotted, but she pushed the door open anyway. The scene inside was chaos. The cook, a formidable woman named Mrs. Fletcher, stood red-faced and furious, while two younger maids cowered behind the prep table. Another woman, one Lydia recognized from Maryanne's list of loyalists, stood with arms crossed, defiant. What's going on? Adrian's voice cut through the noise. Everyone froze. Mrs. Fletcher spoke first. These girls refuse to follow my instructions, my lord. They keep saying Mrs. Crowell told them a different way. Mrs. Crowell no longer works here, Lydia said firmly. Her instructions are void. The defiant woman, Sarah, Lydia remembered, stepped forward. With respect, my lady, Mrs. Crowell ran this kitchen for 10 years. We know how things should be done. Did Mrs. Crowell ask you to undermine my authority? Lydia interrupted. Sarah's face went pale. No, my lady, not exactly. She just said, What did she say? Silence. Adrian moved to stand beside Lydia. Answer the question, Sarah. She said things would go back to normal eventually, that Lady Vale was temporary. Sarah's voice dropped. That we should be patient. The words landed like stones. Lydia's hands clenched, but she kept her voice level. I am not temporary. This is my house. If you cannot accept that, you're welcome to leave. Sarah's defiance crumbled. I didn't mean... I was just trying to help. Help who? Me? Or the woman who's being dismissed for sabotage? Lydia's voice hardened. Make a choice, Sarah. Right now. The kitchen went utterly silent. Everyone watched, waiting. Sarah looked at the floor. I'm sorry, my lady. That's not a choice. I'll follow your orders. Yours and Lord Vale's. And if Mrs. Crowell contacts you again? I'll report it immediately. Lydia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. See that you do. She turned to the others. The same goes for everyone. I understand you're loyal to Mrs. Crowell. She served this house well for years. But she's gone now, and I'm here. You can accept that and stay, or you can leave with severance. But this division ends tonight. Mrs. Fletcher straightened. Yes, my lady. The two young maids nodded frantically. Lydia looked at Adrian. Anything to add? Just that Lady Vale speaks for both of us. What she says is law in this house. His gaze swept the room. If anyone has a problem with that, see me directly. Don't create drama in the kitchens. They left together, the silence behind them gradually giving way to whispered conversations and the resumption of work. In the hallway, Lydia leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. That was terrifying, she admitted. You handled it perfectly. I wanted to run. But you didn't. Adrian smiled slightly. See? Progress. She laughed shakily. Is it always going to be like this? Constant small battles? For a while, probably, until everyone adjusts. He sobered. Maryanne had a decade to build loyalty. We're dismantling it in weeks. There's going to be resistance. I hate this. I know. Me too. They stood there in the dim hallway, exhausted and uncertain, but standing together. I'm going to check the western wing, Lydia said finally. Make sure there aren't any other fires to put out. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. They walked through the house as evening deepened into night, stopping to talk to staff, checking that orders were being followed, slowly reasserting control over the household that had been quietly at war with itself for months. It was exhausting. It was necessary. And for the first time since the night she'd found the earring, Lydia felt like she wasn't fighting alone. Near midnight, they finally retreated to the study. Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Lydia. She took it gratefully. To surviving day 1, he said. Of many, apparently. They drank in silence for a moment. I saw Maryanne on my way here, Lydia said quietly. She's really leaving? End of the week. I bought out her cottage lease and gave her enough to start over somewhere else. Adrian's expression was complicated. It felt like the right thing to do, even after everything. Do you think she regrets it? I think she regrets losing. Whether she regrets the method? He shrugged. Hard to say. Lydia swirled the whiskey in her glass. She told me we were alike, that we both fought for our place. She's not wrong. I wanted to hate her for that comparison. Do you? Lydia considered. No, I think I understand her, which somehow makes it worse. Because it's harder to hate someone you understand. Exactly. Another silence fell, but this one felt less heavy. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The house creaked and settled around them. Can I ask you something? Lydia said. Anything. When you found out about the earring, when you realized what Maryanne had done, did you ever doubt me? Did you ever think maybe I was looking for an excuse to leave? Adrian set down his glass, his expression serious. Honestly? For about 5 minutes. Then I remembered how you looked that night after the dinner, how quiet you'd gone. And I realized you weren't running from me. You were running from being hurt again. That doesn't excuse... I'm not excusing it. I'm explaining how I understood it. He met her eyes. I was angry. I'm still angry sometimes. But I also know that fear makes people do illogical things. You're not the only one guilty of that. What were you afraid of? That I wasn't enough? That you'd leave eventually anyway because I couldn't protect you from the world I brought you into? He laughed without humor. Turns out I couldn't even protect you from my own household. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I hired those people. I trusted Maryanne. I created the system that allowed this to happen. And I ran instead of fighting. They looked at each other, both bruised by their own failures. We're a mess, Lydia said. Complete disaster. Think we can fix it? Adrian reached across the space between them, took her hand. I think we can try, as long as we're trying together. Lydia squeezed back, her throat tight. The clock on the mantel chimed 1. They both startled, then laughed. We should sleep, Adrian said. Probably. Neither moved. Finally, Lydia stood. Same room, or do we need time? Same room, Adrian said immediately. If that's okay. It's okay. They climbed the stairs together, the house quiet around them. When they reached the bedroom door, Lydia hesitated. I had them change the sheets, Adrian said quietly. And burn the old ones. Fresh start. Something in her chest loosened. Thank you. They got ready for bed in careful silence, the awkwardness of two people relearning how to be near each other. When they finally settled under the covers, a careful distance between them, the tension was almost unbearable. I don't know how to do this, Lydia whispered into the dark. Which part? Any of it. Trust. Forgiveness. Moving forward. Me neither. She turned to face him. His expression was barely visible in the dim light from the dying fire. What if we fail? She asked. Then we fail. But we'll know we tried. His hand found hers under the covers. I'd rather fail trying than succeed at pretending everything's fine. Lydia moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. He went still for a moment, then wrapped his arm around her. This doesn't fix everything, she murmured. I know. We still have work to do. I know that too. But for tonight, in the darkness and quiet, it was enough to not be alone. Outside, clouds covered the moon. In a cottage half a mile away, Maryanne Crowell packed the last of her belongings, her face expressionless. The pearl earring, the match to the one she'd planted, sat on the table beside an unfinished letter. She picked it up, held it to the candlelight, then crushed it beneath her boot. Some wars were lost before they began. She'd just been too proud to admit it. The morning after felt brittle. Lydia woke to Adrian already gone from bed, sunlight slicing through the curtains. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, the events of the previous night settling over her like sediment. They'd held each other. They'd talked. But morning had a way of making nighttime promises feel fragile. She dressed and went downstairs to find the house operating with an uncomfortable efficiency. Staff moved quickly, eyes down, voices hushed. Mrs. Brennan appeared the moment Lydia reached the main floor. Good morning, my lady. Breakfast is ready in the dining room. Lord Vale is already... I'll find him myself, thank you. Mrs. Brennan's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe relief, and she stepped aside. Lydia found Adrian in the breakfast room, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence, a plate of untouched food beside him. He looked up when she entered, and something in his face softened. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd tackle the financial records Maryanne kept." He gestured at the papers. "Turns out there are some discrepancies I didn't know about." Lydia's stomach sank. "What kind of discrepancies?" "The kind that suggest she wasn't just undermining you. She was skimming." Lydia sat down hard. "How much?" "I'm still calculating, but it looks like small amounts over several years. Nothing large enough to trigger an audit, but consistent enough to add up." Adrian's jaw was tight. She was careful, very careful. "Are you going to report her?" "I don't know yet." He rubbed his face. "If I do, it becomes public. A scandal. The Vale name dragged through legal proceedings. If I don't, she gets away with theft." "What do you want to do?" Adrian looked at her, his eyes tired. "I want to be done with this. I want to move forward. But I also can't just let it go." "Then don't." Lydia reached for the nearest ledger. "Show me what you found." They spent the next 2 hours going through records, cross-referencing expenses, tracing payments. The theft was elegant in its simplicity. Small overcharges to vendors, phantom maintenance costs, occasional doubled invoices. Nothing dramatic, just a steady bleed of resources. "She was planning for this," Lydia said finally, "building a cushion for when she left, or got pushed out." Adrian closed the ledger with more force than necessary. "I trusted her completely. She helped raise me, for heaven's sake." "I know. And she was stealing from my family the whole time." "Maybe not the whole time," Lydia offered. "Maybe just after she realized she was being replaced." "Does that make it better?" "No, but it makes it human." Adrian stood abruptly, walked to the window. "I'm going to confront her today, before she leaves." "Adrian, I need to hear her say it. Look me in the eye and admit she stole from us." "What if she doesn't?" "Then I'll have my answer anyway." Lydia stood, moved beside him. "Do you want me to come with you?" He hesitated. "This feels like something I need to do alone." "Are you sure?" "No, but I need to try." She understood that. The need to face your betrayer directly, without buffer or witness. "All right, but if you need me, I know where to find you." He left an hour later, riding toward Maryanne's cottage with a rigid posture that spoke of suppressed fury. Lydia watched from the window until he disappeared, then turned back to the house. She had her own work to do. The staff had been walking on eggshells since last night's kitchen confrontation. Lydia needed to either ease the tension or establish clear boundaries. She chose the latter. She called a full household meeting in the main hall. Every servant, every worker, everyone who drew a wage from the Vale estate. They assembled nervously, whispering among themselves. Lydia stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at them. 37 people. Some she knew well, others only by name, all of them watching her with varying degrees of wariness. "I know the last few weeks have been difficult," she began. Her voice carried clearly in the high-ceilinged space. "There's been confusion about authority, about whose orders to follow, about what's expected. I'm here to clarify." She descended the stairs slowly, making eye contact as she went. "Mrs. Crowell is gone. Her influence over this household is finished. If any of you receive communication from her, letters, visits, messages through third parties, you are to report it immediately to either Lord Vale or myself. Is that understood?" Murmured agreement. "Furthermore, any orders that contradict mine or Lord Vale's are to be questioned directly. If you're uncertain, ask. I'd rather answer the same question 10 times than have instructions ignored because someone thought they knew better." She reached the bottom of the stairs, stood among them now rather than above. "I'm not trying to erase what Mrs. Crowell built. She kept this house running for years, and that deserves respect. But I am the lady of this estate now, and that means my word is final, not negotiable, not subject to interpretation based on how things used to be done." Sarah, the defiant kitchen worker from last night, spoke up hesitantly. "My lady, what if we make mistakes? We're still learning how you want things." "Then you'll make mistakes. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting effort and honesty." Lydia's voice softened slightly. "I know I'm different from Mrs. Crowell. I do things differently. That doesn't mean it's wrong, just
different. Give me a chance to prove that my way can work." Mrs. Fletcher stepped forward. "And if we genuinely think something won't work, my lady?"
Tell me. Respectfully, with reasons, but tell me. I'm not a tyrant. I just need to know that when I give an order, it will be carried out, not undermined, not altered, not ignored." The housekeeper, Mrs. Brennan, nodded approvingly. "That's fair, my lady. Is there anyone here who cannot accept these terms?" Silence. 37 faces stared back at her, some relieved, others still uncertain, but none openly defiant. "All right, back to work. And if you need anything, my door is open." They dispersed slowly, the tension in the room easing fractionally. Lydia watched them go, her heart pounding. Public speaking had never been her strength. She preferred written communication, documented instructions, clear paper trails. But this situation required something more immediate. Mrs. Brennan approached once the hall cleared. "That was well done, my lady. I have no idea if it actually worked. It worked. They needed to hear it from you directly, not through intermediaries, not through Lord Vale. From you." Lydia nodded, exhausted already, and it wasn't even noon. "There's another matter," Mrs. Brennan said carefully. "Some of the staff who were dismissed, they're still in the village. They've been talking." "About what?" "About Mrs. Crowell, about you, about divisions in the household." The older woman looked uncomfortable. "It's creating gossip. People are choosing sides." "Wonderful." Lydia rubbed her temples. "What are they saying?" "That you drove Mrs. Crowell out over jealousy. That Lord Vale had to choose between you and her, and she lost because she wasn't nobility." Anger flared hot in Lydia's chest. "That's absurd." "I know that, my lady, but gossip doesn't care about truth." "What do you suggest?" "Ignore it. Eventually, something else will capture their attention." But ignoring problems had never been Lydia's strength either. "No, if there's a narrative spreading, I need to control it." "How?" "Good question." Lydia thought fast. "Invite some of the village women to tea, the ones whose opinions matter. Let them see the house running smoothly under my management. Answer their questions honestly, within reason." Mrs. Brennan looked skeptical. "That's risky, my lady. They'll ask difficult questions." "I'll answer them." Lydia straightened. "Set it up for tomorrow afternoon. 6 to 8 guests. Women whose families have connections to the estate." "As you wish." Mrs. Brennan left, and Lydia stood alone in the now empty hall, wondering if she'd just made another impulsive mistake. But retreating hadn't worked. Maybe confronting the gossip head-on would. Adrian returned near dusk, his face drawn and pale. Lydia met him at the door. "How did it go?" She admitted it, all of it. His voice was flat. "The theft, the sabotage, everything." "What did she say?" "That she earned it. That the Vale family owed her more than they'd ever paid, and she was simply collecting what was due." Adrian's hands clenched. "She wasn't even apologetic, just resigned, like she'd been caught at something inevitable." Lydia guided him toward the study, poured him a drink. He took it, but didn't drink immediately. "I asked her why," he continued. "Why steal if she was already being compensated fairly? She said it wasn't about the money. It was about having something of her own. Something I couldn't take away when I decided to replace her." "Did you tell her about the ledgers? That you had proof?" "I showed her. She barely looked." Adrian finally drank, grimaced. "She said to do whatever I felt was necessary. Prosecute her, ruin her name. She didn't care. She'd already lost everything that mattered. The cottage. Her position. Her purpose," Adrian corrected. "That's what she said. That running the estate gave her purpose, and without it she was just nothing." Lydia sat down across from him. "That's not your fault." "Isn't it? I brought you in. I let you take over. I didn't even think about what it would do to her. You married me. You didn't owe her your household for life. I know that intellectually, but she helped raise me, Lydia. She was there when my mother died, when my father lost his mind to grief. She held this place together when I was too young and stupid to do it myself. And then she sabotaged your marriage and stole from you. Both things can be true." Adrian set down the glass. "I can be grateful for what she did and furious about what she became." "What are you going to do?" "I told her I wouldn't prosecute if she left immediately. Tomorrow. No delays, no goodbyes. Just gone. His voice hardened. And if I ever hear she's spoken about you or this family publicly, I'll bring every charge I can. She agreed? She agreed. They sat in heavy silence. Outside, evening darkened into night. I invited some village women to tea tomorrow, Lydia said finally, to counter the gossip about us. Adrian looked up sharply. That's bold. Or stupid, still deciding which. Why would you do that? Because ignoring rumors didn't work last time. Maybe facing them head-on will. Adrian's expression was complicated, concern mixed with something like admiration. You realize they're going to tear you apart with polite questions. Probably. But at least they'll be doing it to my face where I can respond. You're terrifying when you're determined. I learned from the best. She paused. Will you be there? Do you want me there?
Honestly? No. I think I need to handle this myself, woman to woman. Adrian nodded slowly. All right, but I'll be nearby if you need me. Thank you. He stood, moved to the window, staring out at the darkened grounds. This isn't what I thought marriage would be like. What did you think it would be? Easier. Simpler. Two people building a life together without constantly fighting external battles. That's a fantasy.
I know that now. He turned back to her. Do you regret it? Marrying me? The question hung in the air, dangerous and honest. Lydia considered lying, considered softening the truth, but they'd promised honesty, even when it hurt. Sometimes, she said quietly, when I'm exhausted and everything feels like a war, when I wonder if I traded one difficult marriage for another, but mostly, no, I don't regret it. Even after everything with Maryanne? Maryanne forced us to confront things we were avoiding. In a twisted way, maybe that was necessary. That's a generous interpretation. I'm trying generosity on for size. Still fits weird. Adrian almost smiled. How very you. The next afternoon, 6 women arrived for tea. Lydia recognized most of them. Lady Whitmore, whose husband owned the neighboring estate. Mrs. Davidson, the magistrate's wife. Several others whose names she'd learned at various social functions. All polite smiles and assessing eyes. Mrs. Brennan had set up the drawing room beautifully. Delicate china, fresh flowers, cakes arranged on silver platters. Lydia greeted each guest with practiced courtesy, her nerves screaming beneath a calm exterior. Lady Vale, how lovely, Lady Whitmore said, settling into a chair. We were so pleased to receive your invitation. Translation. We were surprised and curious. I thought it was past time I got to know my neighbors better, Lydia replied smoothly. I've been so focused on settling into the household, I've neglected the social aspect. Quite understandable, Mrs. Davidson said, though we have missed seeing you at recent gatherings. Translation, where have you been? Family matters required my attention, Lydia said, pouring tea with steady hands. But I'm looking forward to being more present going forward. The first 20 minutes passed in pleasant small talk, weather, gardens, upcoming social events. Lydia answered questions about her background carefully, acknowledging her first marriage without dwelling on it, emphasizing her family's respectable, if not noble, lineage. Then Lady Whitmore struck. We heard Mrs. Crowell left the area rather suddenly. Such a shame. She was so integral to the community. Every woman in the room went still, teacups frozen halfway to lips. Lydia met Lady Whitmore's gaze directly. Yes? It was sudden. Mrs. Crowell decided to pursue opportunities elsewhere. After so many years of service to the Vale family, it does seem abrupt. Sometimes change is necessary, even when it's difficult. Was it her choice to leave? Mrs. Davidson asked, her tone carefully neutral. Or was she encouraged? The room held its breath. Lydia set down her cup with deliberate care. Mrs. Crowell and I had different visions for how the household should be run. After discussing it with Lord Vale, we all agreed it would be better if she found a position that better suited her skills. That's quite diplomatic, Lady Whitmore said, though the rumor in the village is that there was significant conflict. There was disagreement, Lydia admitted, but it was resolved professionally. Was it true she was stealing? The question came from a younger woman, Lady Catherine Hale, who immediately looked like she regretted speaking. But the question was out, sharp and unavoidable. Lydia's mind raced. She could deny it, protect Maryanne's reputation, or she could tell the truth and risk seeming vindictive. There were financial irregularities, she said finally, which contributed to the decision that she should leave. Beyond that, I'm not at liberty to discuss details. But you're certain she was at fault? Lady Whitmore pressed. I'm certain that Lord Vale reviewed the evidence thoroughly and made the decision he felt was best for the estate. And you had no influence on that decision? Lydia's temper flared, but she kept her voice level. Of course I had influence. I'm his wife. But the final decision was his, based on facts, not emotions. It must have been difficult, Mrs. Davidson said more gently. Coming into an established household and navigating pre-existing loyalties. It was, Lydia acknowledged. But I'm not trying to erase the past. I'm trying to build a future. Even if that means removing people who were loyal to the family for years? Loyalty to the past doesn't excuse undermining the present. Lydia's voice sharpened. Mrs. Crowell served this family well, but she couldn't accept that her role had changed. That became a problem. For you, Lady Whitmore said. For everyone. Lydia leaned forward. I understand there's gossip, that some people think I drove her out over jealousy or insecurity. Let me be clear. I didn't come here to compete with Mrs. Crowell. I came here as Lord Vale's wife, and I intend to fulfill that role regardless of who approves. The room went silent. Several women looked uncomfortable. Lady Whitmore's expression remained unreadable. That's very direct, she said finally. I'm tired of indirectness. It hasn't served anyone well. Lydia picked up her teacup again, her hand steady. If you want to know something about me or my household, ask. I'll answer honestly, but I won't apologize for taking my rightful place in my own home. Mrs. Davidson actually smiled. I think I like you, Lady Vale. I'm not trying to be likable. I'm trying to be respected. Those aren't mutually exclusive. The tension cracked slightly. Lady Catherine cleared her throat. For what it's worth, I think you're handling an impossible situation with grace. I'm handling it messily and barely holding together, Lydia corrected. But I'm handling it. Genuine laughter rippled through the room. The atmosphere shifted, not to warmth exactly, but to something less hostile. Curiosity, maybe, or grudging respect. The rest of the tea passed more easily. The women asked about her plans for the estate, her opinions on local matters, her thoughts on upcoming social events. Lydia answered honestly, not trying to charm, but not antagonizing either. As they prepared to leave, Lady Whitmore approached her privately. You surprised me today, she said quietly. In a good way? In an honest way. That's rarer than you'd think. The older woman studied her. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone softer, more eager to please. I tried that in my first marriage. It didn't work. Lady Whitmore nodded slowly. Word of advice, don't try to win everyone over. Some people won't like you regardless. Focus on the ones worth the effort. Thank you. And Lady Vale, the gossip won't stop immediately, but you handled yourself well today. That will matter. After they left, Lydia collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Mrs. Brennan appeared with fresh tea. How do you think it went, my lady? I have no idea. I either just secured some allies or made enemies of the entire village. I think you did well. They respect strength, those women, even if they don't like it. Lydia sipped the tea gratefully. I never wanted to be strong. I just wanted to be safe. Sometimes they're the same thing. Adrian found her there an hour later, still sitting in the drawing room as afternoon faded into evening. I heard you faced the Inquisition, he said, sitting beside her. More like trial by tea. I'm not sure I passed. Mrs. Brennan said you were magnificent. Mrs. Brennan is generous. Or accurate. He took her hand. Thank you for doing that. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing about this has been easy. No. But we're still here. Lydia looked at him, this man she'd married with hope and fear tangled together, who'd proven both better and worse than she'd imagined. Are we going to make it? I think so, if we keep choosing each other. Even when it's hard? Especially then. She leaned against him, bone-tired, but not alone. Outside, the sun set over the Vale estate, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, managing staff, rebuilding trust, navigating social politics. But for now, in this quiet moment, they had each other. A knock shattered the peace. Mrs. Brennan entered, her face pale. My lord, my lady, there's a messenger from the village magistrate. Adrian stood immediately. What's wrong? It's Mrs. Crowell. She was found this afternoon, collapsed in her cottage. The physician isn't sure she'll survive the night. Lydia's breath caught. What happened? They're calling it a seizure, but Mrs. Brennan hesitated. There's talk of poison, self-administered. The words hung in the air like smoke. Adrian's face went white. Take me to her, he said hoarsely. Now. The confession had cracked something open, but the real work started in the days that followed. Lydia woke the morning after Maryanne's admission with a strange clarity, the kind that comes after a fever breaks. She'd been right about the sabotage, wrong about the affair, and completely blind to how deep the rot had spread through her own household. Adrian was already awake, sitting at the desk in their room with papers scattered in front of him. He looked up when she stirred. How long have you been up? She asked. Since 5. Couldn't sleep. He rubbed his eyes. I've been going through the staff contracts, trying to figure out who stays and who goes. Lydia sat up, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. You can't do that alone. I'm not. You're going to help. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. That's the point. She crossed the room, still in her nightgown, and sat. The papers were meticulous. Names, positions, years of service. Notes in Adrian's precise handwriting. Some had check marks. Others had question marks. Walk me through it, she said. They spent the next 2 hours dissecting the household staff. Not just who had been loyal to Maryanne, but why. Some had followed her out of genuine respect, others out of fear. A few simply didn't know there was another way to do things. Adrian wanted to be fair. Lydia wanted to be practical. The tension between those two instincts made the conversation messy, but it also made it real. Mrs. Fletcher, Adrian said, tapping the cook's name. She challenged Sarah in the kitchen last night. That counts for something. She also ignored 3 of my menu requests last month, Lydia countered. Said they were impractical. Were they? One was. The others were perfectly reasonable. Lydia frowned. She was testing me, seeing if I'd push back. Did you? No. I let it go because I didn't want to seem difficult. She met his eyes. That was a mistake. Adrian made a note. So we keep her, but make it clear the testing phase is over. Agreed. They worked through the list. Gardeners, footmen, chambermaids, stable hands. Some decisions were easy. Others required compromise. By the time they finished, the sun was fully up and Lydia's head ached. That's 14 people who need to be let go, Adrian said, staring at the final count. 15 if you include Maryanne. She's already gone, left yesterday. Lydia looked up sharply. I thought she wasn't leaving until the end of the week. She moved it up, sent a note saying she didn't want to draw things out. Adrian's expression was unreadable. Probably for the best. Lydia thought about the woman who'd run this house for a decade, who'd shaped its rhythms and systems, now packing her life into trunks and vanishing. There should have been relief. Instead, there was just a hollow ache. Did you say goodbye? She asked. No. Did you want to? Lydia considered. I don't know. Maybe. She stood, stretched. It feels wrong to just erase her, like she never existed. We're not erasing her, we're moving past her. Adrian stood as well, rolled his shoulders. There's a difference. Is there? Has to be. Otherwise, we're just replacing one kind of control with another. The words sat between them, uncomfortable and true. Mrs. Brennan knocked shortly after breakfast, looking anxious. My lord, my lady, there's a delegation from the village. They're asking to speak with you both. Adrian frowned. About what? They didn't say, but they seem upset. Lydia and Adrian exchanged glances. They'd been so focused on internal household matters that they'd forgotten the estate extended far beyond the main house. The village, the tenant farmers, the network of people whose lives depended on the Vale family. All of them would have heard rumors by now. They met the delegation in the main hall. 6 people, 4 men, 2 women, all tenant farmers or shopkeepers Lydia recognized from market days. Their spokesman was Thomas Kern, a blacksmith with calloused hands and a blunt manner. Lord Vale, Lady Vale. He nodded respectfully but didn't bow. We need to talk about what's happening here. What have you heard? Adrian asked. That half the staff's being dismissed. That Mrs. Crowell's been thrown out.
that there's some kind of power struggle and the rest of us are about to get caught in it. Kern crossed his arms. We depend on this estate. If it falls apart, we fall apart too. Lydia felt her stomach drop. She hadn't considered how this would look from the outside. Sudden dismissals, a trusted figure like Maryanne disappearing, the household in upheaval. To people whose livelihoods hung on the estate's stability, it must have looked like chaos. There's no power struggle, Adrian said firmly. There was sabotage. We discovered it, and we're addressing it. That's all. That's sabotage by who? One of the women asked. Mrs. Crowell ran this place like clockwork for years. Now suddenly, she's the villain? It's complicated, Lydia began. Then uncomplicate it, Kern interrupted. Because right now it looks like you came in, decided you didn't like how things were run, and tore everything down. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Lydia had wanted to change things. She'd challenged Maryanne's systems. The sabotage had been real, but her own actions had set the stage for conflict. You're right, she said, and Adrian looked at her sharply. I did want to change things. Some of Mrs. Crowell's methods were outdated. Some didn't fit how I wanted to run the household, but I also didn't see that she was actively working against me, redirecting orders, altering messages, undermining my authority with the staff. Why would she do that? The second woman asked, skeptical. Just because she felt erased. Because I took her place and didn't acknowledge what she'd built. Lydia's voice steadied. We were both wrong, but the sabotage was real, and it was damaging the estate. We couldn't let it continue. Kern studied her. So what now? You're going to fire everyone who was loyal to her and start fresh? No, Adrian said. We're dismissing people who actively participated in the sabotage. The rest stay, provided they're willing to follow Lady Vale's authority going forward. And if they're not, then they leave with severance and references. We're not punishing loyalty. We're ending deception. The delegation murmured among themselves. Kern looked unconvinced. Here's what we need from you, he said finally. Proof this isn't just a personal vendetta. Show us the estate's still stable, that our rents aren't going to spike because you're scrambling to cover losses, that the harvest contracts will be honored. Give us something concrete. Lydia felt a flash of anger. How dare they demand proof when they hadn't seen what she'd endured, but she swallowed it. They weren't wrong to be worried. An unstable estate meant unstable income. They had families to feed. The ledgers are open, she said. Anyone who wants to review them can make an appointment with Mr. Harding, the new steward. You'll see that finances are sound. Harvest contracts will be honored exactly as written, and rents will remain the same. Who's Mr. Harding? Kern asked. Someone I hired from outside the estate. No prior connection to Mrs. Crowell or anyone else here. Lydia met his gaze. A clean slate. We want to meet him. Tomorrow, noon, in the village hall. He'll present the estate's financial status and answer questions. Lydia glanced at Adrian, who nodded. Fair? Kern considered, then stuck out his hand. Fair! They shook. The delegation left, still wary but less hostile. When they were gone, Adrian turned to Lydia. Mr. Harding doesn't know he's presenting financials to the village tomorrow. Then we should probably tell him. You hired him 3 days ago. He's barely unpacked. Then he'll learn fast. Lydia headed toward the study. Come on. We need to prepare. They spent the afternoon with Harding, a thin, nervous man in his 40s who'd managed a smaller estate in the north. He was competent but overwhelmed by the Vale holdings. The idea of presenting to a room full of skeptical villagers made him visibly sweat. I don't have all the numbers yet, he protested. The previous steward's records are a mess. Half the entries are in code, the other half are just missing. Then present what you have, Lydia said. Be honest about the gaps. Tell them you're still sorting through the chaos Mrs. Crowell and Mr. Garrett left behind. That makes me look incompetent. It makes you look honest. She softened her tone. These people don't need perfection. They need transparency. Show them you're not hiding anything. Harding swallowed hard, then nodded. All right, I'll do my best. The next day, Lydia and Adrian walked to the village hall together. The building was packed, more people than had been in the delegation, all curious or worried, or both. Harding stood at the front, pale but determined, his ledgers spread on a table. Lydia and Adrian took seats in the back. She'd suggested they not sit at the head table. This needed to be Harding's show, not theirs. Kern called the meeting to order. Mr. Harding's going to walk us through the estate's finances. Ask questions when he's done, not during.
Harding cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I'll be direct. I've been the Vale Estate steward for less than a week, and the records I inherited are incomplete. Some entries are coded in a way I'm still deciphering. Others are missing entirely. What I can tell you is this. The estate is solvent. Debts are current. Harvest projections are on track. Rents will not increase this year. A murmur ran through the room. However, Harding continued, his voice gaining strength, there were irregularities in how funds were allocated under the previous administration. Supplies ordered but never delivered. Payments made to vendors who don't appear to exist. I'm investigating these discrepancies, and I'll report findings as I have them. How much money are we talking about? Someone called out. Preliminary estimate? 300 pounds over the past year. Gasps. 300 pounds was significant. Not enough to bankrupt the estate, but enough to hurt. Where'd it go? Kern demanded. I don't know yet, but I will find out. Harding met his gaze. I'm not here to cover up mistakes. I'm here to fix them. The room erupted into questions. Harding answered what he could, admitted what he didn't know, and promised follow-up reports. By the end, the mood had shifted from hostile to cautiously hopeful. As people filed out, several approached Lydia and Adrian. Seems like you're taking this seriously, one woman said. That's something, at least. We are, Lydia replied. This estate matters to us. You matter to us. The woman nodded and left. Others followed with similar sentiments. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. A willingness to wait and see. Walking back to the house, Adrian took Lydia's hand. That went better than expected. Harding did well. You did well. Letting him lead instead of taking over. He squeezed her hand. That must have been hard. Terrifying, actually. She smiled slightly. But necessary. Back at the house, the work continued. Staff who'd been uncertain about the changes started to adapt. Mrs. Fletcher presented a new menu plan and asked for Lydia's approval, actually asked, without the subtle undermining. The head gardener, who'd been icily polite for months, started including Lydia in planning discussions. Small victories. But they added up. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Lydia was in the library reviewing household accounts when Mrs. Brennan entered looking flustered. My lady, there's someone here to see you, a woman. She says it's urgent. Who? She wouldn't give her name, just said you'd want to hear what she has to say. Curious, Lydia followed Mrs. Brennan to the small receiving room. A woman stood there, middle-aged, plainly dressed, her hands twisting nervously. Lydia recognized her after a moment. Anne Pritchard, one of the dismissed chambermaids. Mrs. Pritchard, Lydia said carefully, I didn't expect to see you again. I know I shouldn't be here. Anne's voice shook. But I couldn't leave without telling you the truth. What truth? Anne reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather journal. This belonged to Mrs. Crowell. She left it behind when she packed. I found it in her old room. Lydia's pulse quickened. And you're bringing it to me because it has everything. All the orders she gave us. All the ways she told us to undermine you. Dates, names, specific instructions. Anne's eyes filled. I didn't know it was wrong at the time. She made it sound like we were helping the estate, like you didn't know what you were doing. But reading this, she planned it all. Every bit of it. Lydia took the journal, her hand steady despite her racing heart. She flipped through pages. Maryanne's neat handwriting detailing schemes, manipulations, calculated moves designed to make Lydia look incompetent. Why are you giving this to me? Lydia asked quietly. Because it's not right. Anne wiped her eyes. I lost my position because I followed her orders. I don't blame you for that. But I need you to know it wasn't just a few of us. It was systematic, and she enjoyed it. Lydia studied the woman in front of her, scared, ashamed, but trying to do the right thing. Thank you, she said. This takes courage. Will it help you? I don't know yet. But it's the truth. That matters. Anne nodded and left. Lydia stood alone with the journal, turning pages. The detail was staggering. Not just what Maryanne had done, but why. Notes about Lydia's background, her first marriage, her vulnerabilities. It was a psychological profile designed to exploit every weakness. Adrian found her an hour later, still reading. What is that? He asked. She handed it to him without a word. He read in silence, his expression darkening. When he finished, he set it down carefully, as if it might burn him. She documented everything, he said, his voice tight. Right down to planting the earring. Lydia pointed to an entry dated 3 days before the Caldwell dinner. She planned it, knew exactly how I'd react. Because she studied you, like I was a problem to solve. Lydia's laugh was bitter. I thought I was being careful, protecting myself. Turns out I was completely transparent. Adrian sat beside her. What do you want to do with this? I don't know. Part of me wants to burn it, pretend it doesn't exist. And the other part wants to show everyone, prove I wasn't paranoid or difficult, that there was a real campaign against me. She met his eyes. But that feels petty. It's not petty to want vindication, isn't it? Maryanne's gone. The people who helped her are dismissed or reformed. What does exposing all this actually accomplish? Adrian considered. It gives you credibility. Shows the staff and the village that you weren't overreacting, that the changes were necessary. Or it makes me look like I'm still fighting a ghost. Lydia stood, paced. I don't want to be the person who can't let go. Then don't use it as a weapon. Use it as evidence. Adrian stood as well. Keep it. Share the relevant parts with Harding so he understands the full scope of what happened. But don't parade it around. Let the work speak for itself. Lydia stopped pacing. That's surprisingly wise. I have moments. She almost smiled. Rare ones. Don't push your luck. They put the journal away in the study safe. Over the following days, Lydia shared key excerpts with Harding, enough to help him trace the financial discrepancies, not enough to turn it into scandal. The steward was appalled but grateful. The information helped him recover nearly 200 pounds that had been siphoned into false accounts. When Harding presented his findings at the next village meeting, the mood shifted again. People who'd been skeptical started to understand the scale of what Lydia and Adrian had uncovered. The sabotage wasn't just personal, it had cost the estate real money, money that affected everyone. You could have hidden this, Kern said afterward. Made it look like you fixed everything without admitting there was a problem. Hiding it would have just created new problems down the road, Lydia replied. Better to be honest now. Kern nodded slowly. Fair enough. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was respect. And that was a start. Back at the house, changes continued. Lydia implemented new systems, weekly meetings with department heads, written confirmations for all major orders, open ledgers accessible to key staff. Adrian backed every change publicly, even the ones he privately thought were excessive. Do we really need written confirmation for replacing kitchen linens? He asked one night. For now, yes, until everyone's in the habit of following proper channels. Lydia looked up from her notes. It'll feel bureaucratic at first, but it closes loopholes. Maryanne's loopholes. Anyone's loopholes. He couldn't argue with that. The real test came a month after Maryanne's departure. The Caldwells hosted another dinner, an autumn gala, invitation extended to all the major families in the region. Lydia's first instinct was to decline. The last time she'd attended one of their events, everything had fallen apart. We should go, Adrian said when the invitation arrived. Why? So Penelope can make more comments about how I manage things? So you can show everyone you're still standing. He met her eyes. You've rebuilt the household, stabilized the estate, and earned the village's trust. Let people see that. Lydia's stomach knotted. What if they ask about Maryanne? Then we tell the truth. She sabotaged the household. We discovered it. We dealt with it. End of story. People loved her. People respected her. There's a difference. Adrian's expression softened. And they'll respect you too once they see what you've accomplished. Lydia wanted to believe him. But walking into that ballroom again, facing the same people who'd watched Maryanne command the room while Lydia sat silent, it felt impossible. She went anyway. The Caldwell estate blazed with light, just like before. Carriages lined the drive, music drifted from open windows. Lydia wore deep green this time, bold, deliberate. Adrian walked beside her, his hand at her back, steady and sure. Inside, the usual crowd mingled, nobility, landowners, the wealthy merchants who kept the region's economy running. Conversations paused when Lydia and Adrian entered. Eyes tracked them across the room. Lady Penelope approached immediately, her smile sharp. Lydia, Adrian, how brave of you to come. Why wouldn't we? Lydia asked evenly. Well, with all the turmoil at your estate, I heard you've dismissed half your staff. Not half, 14 people, all for cause. Still, it must be difficult managing without Mrs. Crowell's expertise. Penelope's tone was sympathetic, but her eyes gleamed. She was such a fixture. She was. And now we're building something new. Lydia held her gaze. Change is difficult, but necessary. Penelope's smile faltered slightly. Before she could respond, another voice cut in. Lady Vale, might I have a word? Lydia turned to find Lord Hartwell, an older man who owned the neighboring estate. He'd always been polite but distant, the kind of aristocrat who judged people by lineage rather than character. Of course, Lord Hartwell. He drew her aside, away from Penelope's obvious eavesdropping. I wanted to commend you on how you've handled recent difficulties. I've heard from my tenants, they do business with your village, that you've been remarkably transparent about the estate's finances. Lydia blinked, surprised. Thank you. It seemed the right approach. It was. Too many families try to hide their problems until they're catastrophic. You addressed yours directly. He nodded approvingly. Your steward, Harding, is competent. That's rare these days. I'm glad you think so. I do. In fact, I'd like to discuss a potential partnership, joint investment in better irrigation for both our properties, but that's a conversation for another time. He smiled slightly. I simply wanted to say that you've earned my respect. That's not given lightly. He walked away, leaving Lydia standing there, slightly dazed. Adrian appeared at her elbow. What was that about? I think Lord Hartwell just said he respects me. Good. He should. Throughout the evening, similar conversations happened. Not everyone was supportive. Some people clearly sided with Maryanne, thought Lydia had been too harsh, believed the whole situation was blown out of proportion. But more people than she'd expected acknowledged that she'd handled a difficult situation well. Near midnight, as the party wound down, Lydia found herself on the terrace, needing air. The night was cold, stars sharp overhead. Adrian joined her, draping his coat over her shoulders. Ready to leave? Almost. She looked out at the gardens, dark shapes against darker sky. Do you remember the last time we were here? How everything fell apart? I remember you being quiet all night, me being oblivious. I was terrified. Watching Maryanne control the room, watching you defer to her. Lydia's voice dropped. I felt invisible. You're not invisible now. No, I'm not. She turned to him. I didn't think I could do this. Come back here, face these people, prove I wasn't just some paranoid outsider who destroyed a good system. But you did. We did. She squeezed his hand. I couldn't have done it alone. Neither could I. They stood there in the cold, together, while music drifted from the ballroom behind them. We should probably go in, Adrian said. People will talk if we're gone too long. Let them talk, he smiled. Fair enough. They stayed a few minutes longer, the world quiet except for distant music and the wind through bare trees. When they finally went inside, Lydia felt lighter somehow. Not fixed. There was still work to do, still wounds to heal, but standing, moving forward. The carriage ride home was comfortable silence. Adrian dozed against her shoulder. Lydia watched the countryside pass, thinking about everything that had changed in 2 months. How she'd fled over a single piece of evidence. How she'd almost lost everything because she couldn't bring herself to ask one simple question. How fear had nearly destroyed what trust could have saved. When they arrived home, the house was quiet. No crisis waited, no urgent messages, just a household running smoothly because they'd done the hard work of rebuilding it. Mrs. Brennan met them in the entrance hall. My lady, my lord, I hope you had a pleasant evening. We did, thank you. Lydia handed her the cloak. Everything all right here? Perfectly quiet. Cook prepared cold supper if you're hungry. We're fine. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. The housekeeper nodded and withdrew. Adrian watched her go. Remember when she used to report everything to Maryanne? I remember. Now she reports to you, without question. Because we earned it. Lydia started up the stairs. Slowly, painfully, but we earned it. In their room, they prepared for bed in companionable silence. Lydia caught sight of herself in the mirror, still in the green dress. her hair coming loose from its pins. She looked tired, but not defeated. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, watching her. "That I almost threw all this away. But you didn't. Only because you fought for it. For us. We both fought." He came up behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. "That's what makes it work." She leaned back against him, solid and warm. "I love you. I don't think I've said that since I came back." "You have, just not out loud." "Then I'm saying it now, out loud." He turned her around, kissed her softly. "I love you too. Even when you're infuriating. Especially then, probably. Especially then." They fell into bed, exhausted but content. Outside, the estate settled into night, gardens quiet, stables locked, the village beyond dark and peaceful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, the house was theirs, and they'd fought for every inch of it. 3 months after Maryanne's departure, winter settled over the Vale estate like a held breath. Snow covered the gardens, muffled the sounds of the village, turned everything into something quieter and slower. Lydia stood at the study window, watching frost patterns spread across the glass, her mind already on the day's work. Accounts to review, staff schedules to approve, a meeting with Harding about spring planning contracts. The rhythm of running the household had become natural now, not easy, but familiar. Adrian entered carrying 2 cups of tea, set one on her desk. "You're up early again." "Couldn't sleep. Too much to do." "There's always too much to do. That's not going to change." He settled into the chair across from her. "Take a breath occasionally. I'll breathe when we're solvent through winter." "We're already solvent through winter. Harding confirmed it last week." Lydia looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You're annoyingly optimistic these days." "One of us has to be." He smiled. "Besides, we've earned a little optimism. The house is running well. The village trusts us. No one's tried to sabotage anything in months." "Don't jinx it." "I'm not jinxing anything. I'm acknowledging progress." A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Brennan entered, looking hesitant. "My lady, there's a visitor. She's asking for you specifically." Lydia frowned. "Who?" "Mrs. Crowell." The name landed like ice water. Lydia's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Adrian sat up straighter. "She's here?" he asked. "Now?" "In the front hall. She says it's important." Mrs. Brennan's expression was carefully neutral. "Should I tell her you're not available?" Lydia's first instinct was yes. Send her away. They'd moved past all this. But something in Mrs. Brennan's tone made her pause. Not concern, exactly. More like curiosity. "Did she say what she wants?" "No, my lady. Just that she needs to speak with you. Both of you." Lydia looked at Adrian. He shrugged slightly, leaving the choice to her. "Show her to the small sitting room," Lydia said finally. "We'll be down in a moment." Mrs. Brennan nodded and withdrew. "Are you sure about this?" Adrian asked quietly. "No, but I want to know why she's back." Lydia set down her cup, smoothed her skirt. "Whatever it is, we handle it together." Together. They went downstairs. Maryanne waited in the sitting room, standing by the window, her back to the door. She wore a dark traveling cloak, her hair simpler than Lydia remembered. When she turned, her face looked older somehow, tired. "Thank you for seeing me," Maryanne said. No preamble, no false warmth. "We almost didn't," Lydia replied, staying near the door. Adrian moved to stand beside her, a united front. "I wouldn't have blamed you." Maryanne's hands twisted in front of her. "I know I have no right to be here." "Then why are you?" Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. Maryanne took a breath. "Because I owe you both an apology. A real one. Not the half-hearted confession I gave before I left." Lydia crossed her arms. "You confessed to everything. What's left? The why. The real why." Maryanne moved away from the window but didn't come closer. "I told you I wanted control, that I resented being replaced. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." "What's the whole truth?" Adrian asked. Maryanne looked at him, something raw in her expression. "I loved this house. More than I should have. It became my identity, the only thing I had that was truly mine. When your father died and you inherited, I thought maybe you'd see me differently, see that I'd held everything together. that I was more than just the woman who managed things. The words hung in the air. Lydia felt understanding dawn cold and uncomfortable. You wanted him to marry you, she said quietly. Maryanne's laugh was bitter. I wanted him to see me as more than staff, as someone who'd given everything to this family. She looked at Adrian. But you never did. You were kind, respectful, grateful. But you never saw me as anything except the woman who ran the house. Adrian's face went carefully blank. Maryanne. I'm not asking for anything now, I'm just explaining. Maryanne's voice steadied. When you announced your engagement to Lydia, I was devastated. Not because I still thought you'd choose me, I knew that was impossible, but because it meant my place here was truly over. Everything I'd built, everything I'd been, it would all belong to someone else. So you tried to destroy it, Lydia said. I tried to prove she wasn't good enough. Maryanne met her eyes. I told myself I was protecting the estate, that you didn't understand how things worked, that you'd ruin everything. But really, I just couldn't stand watching someone else have what I wanted. The honesty was disarming. Lydia had expected defensiveness, justification, not this stark admission. Why are you telling us this now? She asked. Because I've spent 3 months away from here trying to build a new life, and I keep thinking about what I destroyed. Maryanne's composure cracked slightly. Not just your marriage, though I nearly destroyed that too, but my own integrity. I used to be someone who valued honesty, loyalty. I became someone who manipulated and lied because I couldn't face my own pain. That doesn't undo what you did, Adrian said. I know. Nothing undoes it. Maryanne straightened. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I was. What I did. And I'm sorry, truly. Silence filled the room. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. Lydia studied the woman in front of her, broken in ways Lydia recognized too well. The fear of irrelevance, the desperate need to matter. The way pain could twist into cruelty if you weren't careful. I don't forgive you, Lydia said finally. Not completely. What you did was calculated and cruel, and it nearly cost me my marriage. I know. But I understand why you did it. Lydia's voice softened just slightly. And I think, in a different life, we might have been friends. We're not that different. Maryanne's eyes glistened. That's generous. It's honest. Lydia glanced at Adrian. We've learned the value of honesty lately. Adrian stepped forward. What are you doing now? Where are you living? I found a position in the north, managing a smaller estate. The family's kind, if a bit disorganized. Maryanne smiled faintly. I'm trying to do it differently this time. Build relationships instead of systems. Good. Adrian's expression was complicated. I hope it works out. So do I. Maryanne moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The journal Anne Pritchard gave you, the one with all my plans. I didn't leave it behind accidentally. I wanted you to find it. Lydia frowned. Why? Because you deserve to know the full extent of what happened. Not just pieces. The whole truth. Maryanne's voice dropped. I'd already confessed to Adrian, but I knew you'd need more than words. You'd need evidence, so I left it where someone would find it and bring it to you. That was a risk. We could have used it to destroy your reputation completely. I know, but you didn't, and that told me something about who you are. Maryanne met her gaze. You're better than I gave you credit for, better than I was. She left before Lydia could respond. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house. Adrian turned to Lydia. Are you all right? I don't know. Lydia sank into a chair. That was not what I expected. What did you expect? Justifications? Excuses? Not that. She rubbed her face. She left the journal on purpose, so I'd have proof. Because she knew you'd need it. To trust yourself again. The words hit harder than Lydia expected. She looked up at Adrian, something loosening in her chest. I did need it. The evidence, the concrete truth. I know, and she knew too. Adrian sat beside her. Doesn't excuse what she did, but it complicates it. Everything's complicated. Always has been. They sat in silence for a long moment, snow falling outside, the house quiet around them. Do you think she'll actually change? Lydia asked. I don't know. But I think she wants to. That's something. Is it enough? For us?
We don't have to decide. She's not our responsibility anymore. Adrian took her hand. We focus on what we can control. This house. Our marriage. Building something that lasts. Lydia squeezed back. When did you become so wise? Desperation teaches you things. She almost laughed. Fair enough. The weeks that followed felt different somehow. Lighter. As if Maryanne's final confession had lifted a weight Lydia hadn't realized she was still carrying. The anger that had simmered beneath everything, the sense of being wronged, of needing to prove herself, it began to fade. Not disappear, but transform into something more productive. Lydia threw herself into improving the estate with renewed energy. She consulted with Harding on modernizing the accounting systems, met with tenant farmers to discuss crop rotation and irrigation, worked with Mrs. Fletcher to develop more efficient kitchen operations that reduced waste. Adrian watched her work with something like awe. You're terrifying when you're focused. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. The changes weren't always popular. Some of the older staff grumbled about new methods. A few tenant farmers resisted the crop rotation plan. But Lydia had learned to listen to concerns without letting them derail progress. She adapted when it made sense, held firm when it didn't. And slowly, resistance turned to buy-in. The real shift came in early spring. Lord Hartwell, the neighboring landowner who'd praised Lydia at the Caldwell Gala, requested a meeting. He arrived with his own steward and a proposal. Lady Vale, Lord Vale. He settled into the study with the ease of someone used to power. I've been watching how you've transformed this estate. I'm impressed. Thank you, Lydia said carefully. I'd like to propose a partnership, joint investment in improved irrigation infrastructure. Your land and mine share water sources. If we coordinate, we can increase yields for both estates. Adrian leaned forward. That's a significant investment. It is, but the returns would be substantial. More importantly, it would set a precedent. If two major estates can work together instead of competing, it could change how the entire region operates. Lydia studied him. You're not just talking about irrigation, are you? Hartwell smiled. Perceptive. No, I'm not. I'm talking about a new model. Estates working collaboratively, sharing resources, knowledge, innovation. The old way, each family protecting its own interests at everyone else's expense. It's unsustainable. And you think we can lead that change? I think you already are. The transparency you've shown with your tenants, the way you've rebuilt trust after a major disruption, it's exactly what the region needs. Hartwell's expression grew serious. I won't lie. Some families think you're too progressive, too willing to empower common people, but I think you're practical, and practicality wins in the long run. Lydia glanced at Adrian. He gave a slight nod. Your call. We're interested, she said, but we'd need to see detailed projections, and we'd want our tenants involved in planning. Their input matters. Agreed. I wouldn't have it any other way. Hartwell stood, extending his hand. I'll have my steward coordinate with yours. Let's build something new. They shook. When Hartwell left, Lydia and Adrian sat in stunned silence. Did that just happen? Adrian asked finally. I think so. Lord Hartwell, the man who once told me your family wasn't prominent enough for a Vale marriage, just proposed a partnership. Times change. People change. Lydia stood, moved to the window. Or maybe they just recognize necessity when they see it. You changed his mind by doing the work, proving yourself. We changed his mind? Together. Adrian joined her at the window. What do you think? Should we do it? The irrigation project. Absolutely. It makes economic sense. Lydia turned to face him. But it's more than that. It's a statement that we're not just surviving, we're leading. No pressure then, she smiled. When has that ever stopped us? The irrigation partnership became the blueprint. Over the following months, 3 more estates joined the collaboration. Planning sessions brought together landowners, stewards, and tenant representatives, something unheard of in the region's history. The old guard grumbled. The younger generation watched closely, and Lydia found herself at the center of it all, no longer fighting for acceptance, but building something entirely new. The transformation of the Vale household continued in parallel. The staff who'd once been divided between old and new loyalties began functioning as a genuine team. Mrs. Brennan took more initiative, solving problems before they reached Lydia.
Mrs. Fletcher started training younger cooks, passing on knowledge instead of hoarding it. Even the resistant head gardener began asking for Lydia's input on seasonal planning. "It's like watching a machine finally run smoothly," Adrian observed one evening. They were in the library, Lydia reviewing contracts while he read by the fire. "Machines break down," Lydia said without looking up. "This is more like an ecosystem. Everyone has a role. Everyone matters." "When did you become a philosopher?" "When I stopped trying to control everything and started building systems that work without constant intervention." Adrian set down his book. "You know what I just realized? You never talk about Thomas anymore." Lydia's pen paused. She looked up. "No, I suppose I don't." "When did that stop?" She considered. "I don't know exactly. Sometime between confronting Maryanne and rebuilding this place, I stopped seeing betrayal in every shadow. Because you learned to trust again. Because I learned to trust myself. To handle whatever comes." She set down her pen. "Thomas destroyed my first life because I let him. I gave him power over my reality. But here, I chose differently. Even when I made mistakes, running away, building cases instead of talking, I learned from them instead of being defined by them. That's growth. That's survival." She smiled slightly. "Though I suppose they're the same thing sometimes." Summer brought the first harvest under the new irrigation system. Yields increased exactly as projected. Tenant farmers who'd been skeptical became advocates. The partnership estates held a joint celebration, something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Lydia stood at the edge of the gathering, watching families from different estates mingle, children running between the tables, music drifting across the fields. Adrian found her, handed her a cup of cider. "You did this," he said quietly. "We did this. No, this was your vision. I just supported it." She leaned against him. "Don't diminish your role. None of this works if we're not unified." "Are we? Unified?" "More than I ever thought possible." She turned to face him. "I was so sure marriage meant losing myself, becoming invisible. But this, we made each other stronger. Even through all the disasters. Especially through those." He kissed her forehead. "I love you. Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last few hours." "Unacceptable. I love you. I love you too." They stayed until the stars came out, until families began gathering sleepy children and heading home, until the fields were quiet except for crickets and distant laughter. Walking back to the house, Lydia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Contentment. Not the absence of problems. There would always be problems. But the confidence that she could handle them. That they could handle them. Fall arrived with crisp mornings and the business of preparing for winter. Lydia was in the study reviewing supply orders when Mrs. Brennan entered with a small wooden box. "This just arrived, my lady, from the north." Lydia took it, curious. No return address, just her name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single pearl earring, the match to the one Maryanne had planted. And a note. "I found this while packing to move again. Thought you might want the set. Not as a reminder of what I did, but as proof of what you overcame. You built something beautiful from the wreckage I created. That takes courage I never had." Lydia stared at the earring, then at the note. Adrian entered, saw her expression. "What is it?" She showed him. He read the note, looked at the earring. "Are you going to keep it?" he asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to throw it in the fire." "And the other part?" Lydia picked up the earring, held it to the light. It gleamed, innocent and weighted with history. "The other part thinks she's right. It's not about what was done to me. It's about what I did after." She placed both earrings, the one from her bed, the one from the box, side by side on her desk. Two small objects that had once represented betrayal. Now they represented something else. Survival, growth, the choice to build instead of break. "I'll keep them," she said finally, "not to dwell on, but to remember that pain doesn't have to define you, that you can take something meant to destroy you and turn it into proof of strength." Adrian pulled her close. "You're extraordinary. I'm practical." Same thing. Winter returned, the cycle completing. 1 year since the Caldwell dinner that had shattered everything.
1 year since Lydia had fled with a pearl earring and a broken heart. The Caldwells hosted their annual winter gala. This time, the invitation didn't fill Lydia with dread. She dressed in midnight blue again, deliberate callback. But this time she felt entirely different, not invisible, not afraid, ready. The ballroom looked the same. Same candles, same music, same aristocratic faces, but Lydia moved through it differently. People sought her out now, asked her opinion on estate management, tenant relations, the irrigation partnership. She'd become someone whose judgment mattered. Lady Penelope approached, her smile less sharp than usual. "Lydia, you look well." "Thank you, Penelope. So do you. I heard about your partnership with Lord Hartwell. Quite ambitious. Necessary, really. We're seeing remarkable results." Penelope studied her. "You've changed. You're more assured." "I've learned a few things. About estate management. About myself." Lydia met her gaze steadily. "And about not letting other people's opinions define me." For once, Penelope had no clever response. She simply nodded and moved away. Adrian appeared at Lydia's elbow. "Making friends?" "Making peace, maybe." She took his hand. "Ready for another dance?" "With you? Always." They moved to the floor as music swelled. Other couples joined, the same people who'd watched Lydia's world crumble a year ago, who'd whispered about the sudden staff dismissals and Maryanne's mysterious departure. Now they danced beside her as equals. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, guiding her through a turn. "That a year ago I was terrified in this room, watching Maryanne control everything, feeling invisible, finding that earring and having my world collapse." Lydia looked up at him. "And now I'm here, dancing with my husband, running an estate I'm proud of, building partnerships that are changing the region. It's surreal." "You earned it. Every bit." "We earned it. Stop being so generous. Take credit for once." She laughed. "Fine. I earned it. Through pain and mistakes and refusing to give up even when giving up seemed easier." There she is. The dance ended. They stayed on the floor for another, then another. When they finally retreated to the terrace for air, Lydia was breathless and happy. "Look," Adrian said, pointing at the sky. "Snow." Flakes drifted down, catching the light from the ballroom. Lydia tilted her face up, let them melt on her skin. "Remember last year?" she asked. "We stood out here and I told you I felt invisible. And I was too blind to see it. You see me now. Always." He pulled her close. "What do you want, Lydia? For the future. Not the estate, not the partnerships. You." She considered. "I want to keep building, not just systems, but trust. Real trust. The kind that doesn't break the first time something goes wrong. We're getting there. I want to matter. Not because of who I married or what position I hold, but because of what I create, what I contribute." She looked at him. "And I want us. This. Whatever we've built together, I want it to last." "It will. We'll make sure of it. Promise?" "Promise." They went back inside as the party reached its peak. Later, in the carriage home, Lydia felt the exhaustion of the evening settling in. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that comes from engaging fully instead of hiding. The Vale estate appeared through falling snow, lights glowing in windows. Home. Not because it was a building or a legacy or a responsibility, but because she'd fought for it, made it hers, made it theirs. Inside the house was warm and quiet. Staff had left lamps burning in the entrance hall. Everything was exactly where it should be, the result of months of rebuilding, of establishing trust, of creating systems that worked. In their bedroom, Lydia removed her jewelry carefully, setting each piece in its place. The pearl earrings sat in a small box on the vanity, visible but contained. She looked at them for a moment, remembering the panic they'd caused, the pain, the growth that followed. "No regrets?" Adrian asked, watching her. "About which part?" "Any of it. All of it." She thought about Thomas, about the first marriage that had taught her to protect herself above all else, about arriving at the Vale estate determined to never be vulnerable again, about Maryanne's sabotage in her own flight and the brutal work of rebuilding. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. I wish some things had been easier, but I wouldn't trade the lessons, even the painful ones, especially those. They settled into bed, the house creaking softly around them. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering everything in white, erasing tracks, creating new landscapes. "What happens tomorrow?" Adrian asked into the darkness. "We keep going, keep building, keep choosing each other." Lydia turned to face him. "That's all we can do." "Sounds perfect." "It won't be perfect. There'll be new crises, new challenges." "I know, but we'll handle them. Together." Together. Lydia closed her eyes, Adrian's warmth beside her, the house solid and peaceful. Somewhere in the north, Maryanne was building her own new life. In the village, families slept secure in the knowledge that their estate was stable. In the fields, irrigation systems waited beneath snow for spring. Everything was connected, everything mattered. And Lydia Vale, once broken, once afraid, once convinced that survival meant isolation, had learned something revolutionary. That trust was stronger than fear, that partnership was more powerful than protection, that the courage to be vulnerable, to choose love over safety, to build instead of defend, that was what transformed lives. The pearl earrings gleamed softly on the vanity, catching moonlight through the window. Small objects, massive meaning, proof that she'd survived. More than that, proof that she'd chosen to thrive. Outside, the snow fell and fell, covering the world in possibility. Inside, two people who'd nearly lost everything slept peacefully, their hands intertwined, their future uncertain but no longer frightening. They'd learned to build through storms, and that made all the difference.